Hello and welcome back to this second video in the Good to Great series from the Mind Tailors about emotional intelligence. Now, following on from the last video where we looked at mindset, the importance of positive self-talk, the importance of a growth mindset, we now dig deep into emotional intelligence, understanding in particular empathy, sympathy, and compassion, and when we should use these different emotions, when it's most appropriate to do so, both in our private lives and at work. As ever, hit the like and subscribe button below, and if you have any comments such as when you use compassion but you should have used empathy in a work-related environment, do let us know. We would love to hear your thoughts. Enjoy the second video from the Mind Tailors entitled Emotional Intelligence. Emotional intelligence is a relatively new term. Emotional intelligence is your ability to recognize and understand emotions in yourself and others. It's your ability to use awareness to manage your behavior and relationships. Emotional intelligence is a far greater asset than your IQ, your intellectual intelligence. If you are able to understand your emotions, you are able to put distance between you and your emotions. You allow yourself to gain awareness of your emotions. Once you gain this awareness, the most crucial part to being a great leader, you gain control. You can recognize your emotions, and through understanding, this allows you to actually gain control of others. There are 4 parts to emotional intelligence. The first is self-awareness. Self-awareness will lead you to good decision-making. Understanding what decisions you've made and why you've made them is key to understanding. The key to understanding is then to label. For example, what am I feeling now? When you're going through an emotional state, label how you are feeling and actually take that into detail. So, if you're angry, why are you angry? What kind of anger is it? Is it resentment? Is it disappointment? Really dig deeper to understand not just the top tier of I'm angry. The second part is self-management. Once you are self-aware, you can engage self-management. You can start to handle these distressing emotions. Every emotion has a function. What would I like to feel? What is the ideal emotion? How should I feel? How do I want to use this? Do I want to be happy? Do I want to be balanced? Do I want to be whatever? How do you want to feel? Do you want to be positive all of the time? The third part is recognizing these emotions in others and understanding what emotions are right for different situations. Using emotional intelligence like empathy, sympathy, and compassion, which we will come on to a little bit later on. It helps you understand these emotions and what place they have and how you can use them. It allows you to understand what everyone else is feeling and why they are feeling that way. Dig deeper. They're not just angry. Why are they angry? You can start to perceive these feelings in others because that understanding now involves recognition in others. The fourth part is that part that allows you to build relationships. When people feel that you relate to and they know that you care about them, not just because they've come to you and said, I'm struggling, but you've recognized those emotions within them and you've taken the time to delve deep and go, no, Tom is struggling today. I can see he is struggling. I'm going to go and ask if he's okay. I'm going to put something in place to try and help him manage that. This shows that you care about them, and people will do far greater work for you when they realize that you care about them. How do you want that person to feel? Because emotions and data emotions are crucial data. They give you the subtext to know how your team is feeling, how your team is working. We talked previously about 80% of what affects your work comes from outside of work. How are you going to know what that 80% is? It comes from the person's emotions and the person's emotional data that they are subconsciously transmitting all of the time. You need to be able to learn that coding, learn that language, see the visual cues, see the emotional cues that allow you to use that data to then act accordingly, to make sure your team is functioning at the highest possible level. There are so many different emotions, and actually once you start to understand your own emotions and document your own emotions, it will allow you to recognize these within others, and it would allow you to then take action. So now I want you to have a look at how to do a bit of self-reflection. In your workbook, detail an emotion that you've experienced in the past week or so. Was it joy, anger, fear, disappointment, surprise? Detail the emotion. Detail the subtext of that emotion. So like we said, if it was anger, why was it anger? Or was it resentment? Was it disappointment if it was fear? Why were you afraid? What was the fear related to? Detail the context around why you felt that way. What were all the factors? So essentially, what we need to do is a full-on investigation like you would do for an aircraft crash investigation, for example. Look into the context as to why you felt that emotion. Detail the context behind it, and then how did this emotion affect your thoughts? How did it affect your actions? Were you rash? Did you take split decisions, and how did that work out? What was the data this emotion was giving you, i.e., was it a value? Was it a value that was threatened? Did you feel happy? Did you feel rewarded? If you had a better understanding of the data emotion, would you have changed how you acted or viewed that situation? In your workbook, go through each of these points and actually understand all of the data, all of your situation. How that made you act in a certain way, because the best way to learn this is to practice, and you or the things that are affecting you or the way that you feel will be exactly the same things affecting your team. This then allows you to then use that, understand that, and recognize that, and act. Because the denial of emotions isn't the only danger that we face. When we rely too heavily on our left brain, we can also become too literal, leaving us without a sense of perspective, missing the meaning that comes with putting things into context. So now we've looked at an emotion that we felt and why we felt that way. One of the key drivers as to why people feel and fear emotions is the pressure and the impact that day-to-day life is having on their values, their core values. These are values that are hard-coded into you. They're not so much whether you're ambitious or not, but they are what is important to you. To further understand this, we're going to do another exercise. In your workbook, draw a blank shield, a coat of arms. Tribes used to go to battle with this coat of arms depicting the clan, their tribe, the army or the house they belonged to. It was actually an indication as to who they were. If you were going to have a coat of arms for you that really depicted you, and you included what your core values are, well, that's what I want you to do. Divide the shield up into 3, 4, or 5 sections and draw or write what values are important to you. Is it people? Is it family? Is it love? Is there money involved? Is it cars? Is it pets? Whatever it might be, the things that are important to you. Is it power? Is it clothes? Any of these things. What is important to you? Important enough that you would put that on your coat of arms and your shield to show the world that this is a representation of you. So just take 10 minutes, pause the video, and design your shield. Once you've done that, why don't you go through it with a partner or a friend? This will allow you to articulate those values. If you find it difficult or hard to articulate a value, then maybe that value is not as important as you first thought, and perhaps you need to reassess why you felt that way. If they roll off your tongue, well, those are your core values, and it's important to understand what your core values are. Now, once you know what those core values are, carry out this exercise with your team. See what your team's core values are. See how those shields and actually how many of those values match within your team, and also how many are different. Because a particular value may be important to you and a different value will be important to them, and it's important for you to recognize that, allowing you to understand and gain insight into what's important to them. Understand how emotions are going to play out, because you cannot judge everyone according to your values. When we talk about emotional intelligence is your mindset, which, remember, is your attitude, not your aptitude, plus your values. This would equal your emotional intelligence, your unconscious, deeply rooted state. What is also important is actually, how do your values show up? How do they visualize? How do they come through? I'd like you to briefly think of a time when you led or made a decision from your highest point values. So think about your values that you've now detailed on your shield, and actually how a decision that you've made in the past stuck to those values and was indeed a representation of those values. For example, think of humility as a value. How might this show up in the choices and behavior of you as a manager? We talked about that in the introduction, that moment when you transition into becoming a manager, a leader, and not an employee. It is no longer about you. How does humility show up within that? Are you open and do you ask for feedback? Do you actively seek opportunities to give and share credit? Do you share personal stories of mistakes or failures? Do you admit when you don't know something? Adopt a mindset of being in service to the team. The team are the most important thing in order to facilitate that team to do outstanding work. Now that you've identified your most important values, which ones influence the mindset which you manage your team with? Which of those values do you portray? Which do you display within the way that you manage the team? And how does that come across? Are there others on your list that you can intensely practice as a mindset? Now, indeed, is an important time to sit back and reflect. In your role as a leader, when are your values challenged? When are they pushed? When are you under pressure? When do you not agree with some of the actions that are taken? It might be at a board level, a bad decision is made and you feel it's not in the best interest of the rest of the company. Is integrity or humility one of your values? Think of a time when that was pushed. How do you react? How did that show up? Because you can now start to understand that if you act in a certain way and you don't know what the team members' values are, you're likely to cause friction, or the process will not be as smooth as it could have been. This is why emotional intelligence is different to cognitive intelligence. We've talked a bit about emotional intelligence, but IQ, or cognitive intelligence, is your ability to learn and understand new situations, to reason through a given problem, to apply knowledge to a current situation. It primarily involves the neocortex portion of the brain, which governs abstract thinking or reasoning. We will come on to System 1 and System 2 thinking and how to apply this a little bit later on. For now, it's important to understand the difference between cognitive intelligence, which is your ability to learn and understand new situations, to reason through a given problem and apply knowledge to a current situation, and emotional intelligence, which is your ability to understand emotions, data, your ability to recognize and understand emotions in yourself and others. It's a key difference. They both work together. But it is the understanding of both that will allow you to become a true master. So why is emotional intelligence so important? Well, actually, far too many times managers and recruiters recruit based on technical skills, whereas actually technical skills is only one small part of this equation. Think about your cognitive intelligence, your ability to work your way through a problem, your emotional intelligence and your technical skills or work assessing parts within this engine allow this process to drive forward. Think about some of the external factors that we mentioned about stress, money worries, sleep, a new baby, family illness. Such things are data. All of these factors would show up as emotions which will affect a person's technical skills and their ability to do their job. So what are the key emotions when it comes to relating to others? There are 3 main emotions that we need to understand. The first is sympathy. Everybody can apply sympathy. Sympathy is simply the awareness of another's feelings and experiences and understanding that one might help by easing those feelings. So, for example, I feel for you. For example, if somebody told you some sad news, I feel for you. I feel your pain. You are living that experience with them. The next is empathy. Empathy takes the feelings and experiences of others and internalizes them. It carries the experience of another's emotions and situation. So empathy is very different to sympathy. So for example, empathy is understanding that person's issues and needs. Lastly is compassion. Compassion takes it a step further, so that empathy then leads to a desire to take action, to help alleviate the suffering from another person. So whereas compassion is, I want to help you, sympathy is the highlighted awareness that another person's plight has something to be alleviated. Empathy is the ability to take perspective and in some cases vicariously experience the circumstance and emotional state from another. So what emotion is best? Research shows us that too much empathy can cause stress and burnout for the empathizer. Brain regions are activated in the person suffering and empathizing. With sympathy, you're too emotionally involved. Empathy can cause you to burn out. So studies show that compassion gives you enough space to allow you to understand and practically want to do something. Compassion produces feelings of concern and motivation to help the other person. Compassion training can lower stress hormones and boost immunity and may even reduce the risk of heart disease. Being able to help makes you feel good. Studies show that actually one of the most healthy acts that you can do is an act of charity. It's the one that gives you the biggest hit of happiness. Not necessarily just giving money to somebody else, but actually doing something for somebody else releases a number of hormones within the body and actually makes you feel good. Jeff Wayne, the CEO of LinkedIn, said, "Compassion is the most objective form of empathy. We have enough space between your feelings and the other person's feelings when you are in a position to help them and ultimately leave that suffering if that is what is required." So compassion, how can you cultivate compassion? Well, ask how you can help and don't assume that you know what's wanted or needed. This will be key when it comes to the communication module a bit later on. By not imposing your solutions on a problem, so you can ask for how you can help, but don't assume. Don't impose your solutions. Let the other person tell you what is needed. Look for commonalities between your team members. Look at the shields. Look at the values. Understand how values show up and how different things are important to different team members. Encourage cooperation instead of competition within your team. Do you recall when we talked about the army, the brothers and sisters actually being rewarded for helping somebody else? And how can you use that mindset within your team? How can you reward cooperation, collaboration? Bring that to the forefront. Cultivate genuine curiosity about the individuals on your team. Try hard to understand them. Look at the various emotions. Look at your emotions. Think about what the emotions were that led you to decide good, bad, or indifferent decisions. Think about those and how that affected your team. Why did they choose to make that decision? Lead by example. Treat your team and treat others with compassion because that will be contagious. There's a study that shows to get a group of people acting in a certain way, you need 70% of people acting in the same way and others will follow. Candid Camera did some very famous TV sketches where the subject walked into a lift and the lift was full of Candid Camera actors and all 7 actors in the lift turned around. The test subject in the lift also turned around because they followed the group. If you're waiting for a train and there's the yellow safety line, if you can get 70% of people stood behind the yellow line, the rest will follow. Recent studies have shown that in addition to this, the same result can be achieved with only one person saying something multiple times. The brain can't distinguish between many people saying something once and one person saying something multiple times. This is amplified if that one person is in a position of power or is idolized. As the leader, you have a very significant voice. So, if you act with compassion, you understand emotions, you understand data, you drive that forward, and people will follow because actually, it shows that you care, that you've understood what is important to them. Always be mindful of boundaries. Avoid being an emotional sponge and actually respect people's boundaries. The core of emotional intelligence, the limbic system, is best learned through motivation, extending practice and openness to feedback. There is no instant fix. There's no magic pill. It's all about feedback. It's all about perseverance. So, in terms of application, aim for compassion. Use sympathy to understand the emotions, but aim for compassion that allows you enough space that you're not getting too emotionally involved to allow you to make a decision, to make a difference, to make a change. And it's your team. You are the leader of that team. That team is the most important thing, not you. The best place to learn, the best place to understand is yourself. All of those things that sit within you and that affect you will also affect them. Also understand your values. Really get deep and detailed in your values. Lots of people talk about detailing their goals, only writing down those goals, but actually, goals are only a small part. What people forget to detail are their values. Understand your own values. What are you grateful for? What does good look like to you? What do your values look like? How does that work? What's important to you? Is it family? Is it money? Is it fame? Is it recognition? Know your values. But also, take time to know your team's values. Make it an exercise together. Put up the shields. Share your shields. Share your coat of arms. You should be proud of it. Your values represent who you are. Values are critically important. It's what drives us, and it is what will drive your team.